We're going to move on now to talk about the hearing aspects of it. We've got Breege MacArdle here to talk to us about the hearing, and then again we will have kind of questions after.
Thank you very much, Sue. And it's an enormous pleasure and honour to be here today, because it's quite something to learn so much from parents, which is what I've done most of my life as a paediatrician. But thank you very much for your contributions. So, just to say, I am not a national expert on hearing in children with Allport syndrome, but I do have children under my care who come to our centre. So Sue did give me a very brief outline of what I should cover today a few days ago, so I shall do my best.
Based on what you all asked to hear.
Well, some of what you asked, because lots of the questions I won't be able to answer. Okay, so what I'm planning to do in this very brief part of the afternoon is to say a little bit about how we hear, because it's terribly important in understanding what happens in Allport syndrome, and say a little bit about what does happen in the ear in Allport syndrome, and just talk a little bit about the types of hearing loss and the interventions that are available. For good hearing, we need three parts of the ear working very well. So we tend to talk about the outer ear, so this is the pinna on the outside and the external ear canal. So sound is vibrational energy, and it comes down through this root and it hits the middle ear next. We've got our eardrum here, and we've got these three little bones in the middle ear: the hammer, the anvil and the stirrup. This is the smallest bone in the body. So the sound comes down here as a vibrational energy and it gets transmitted along these little bones in the middle ear into the inner ear system. So we've got our outer ear, middle ear and inner ear. And this is the part of the ear that's affected in Allport syndrome. The inner ear has got two systems, this system here for hearing and this movement detector system here, the balance system. Now, in the organ of hearing, the cochlea, are these very important structures which become affected in Allport syndrome. So in the inner ear, we've got lots of fluid-filled spaces and lots of very specialised cells that help us to hear. So this is inside the organ of hearing. Now, the things to remember about this are, first of all, we've got this very important structure which is called a basement membrane or basilar membrane, on which all these very specialised cells sit, which help us to hear. And the cells to remember about are these hair cells, we call them. These are very special sound detector cells, and they've got these little hairs on the surface. So sound comes down through that external ear canal, comes along those little middle ear bones and comes into this system here. Now we've got fluid in this system here, and we've got fluid inside here as well. So the sound sets up a wave, a travelling wave of the frequencies in the speech signal that's coming into the ear, and it causes motion of these cells on this basement membrane. And this is really what the signal to the system that a sound has come in and needs to be detected. So this is the cochlea, the organ of hearing. It's got 2.5 turns, and on these turns in the cochlea are these very special hair cells sitting on the basement membrane. This is just another very fancy picture of the cells, and they're arranged in 3 different rows: outer hair cells and inner hair cells. So, I mean, obviously the ear and the kidney have got a lot in common. They develop between the 5th and 8th week of pregnancy, and they've got these membranes which are so important to hearing and kidney function. And the membranes have got this very important component in them called the collagen, which is affected by the gene mutation in Allport syndrome. And these membranes are really important in maintaining chemical balance and electrical balance between these different cells that get activated in the renal function and in hearing function. So in Allport syndrome, what happens is the collagen in this basement membrane doesn't form normally, and there are very typical appearances, gaps and thickening of that membrane, and often cells get deposited in this area of the cochlea as well. So what happens is we've got a really solid system here, and these hair cells aren't able to rock around the clock anymore. It's a kind of, the abnormal collagen in the inner ear affects the ability of the hair cells to work. That's what causes the deafness in this condition. So it's important, when we're thinking about hearing, to think about how it actually gets affected in Alport syndrome, because I do see some children who've got very minor hearing problems before the renal disease is picked up, and we always do check for blood in the urine of any deaf child who presents in our clinic. It's part of national best practice, should be anyway. So this is an audiogram, and what we're interested really in is whether the child can hear within this range of hearing here. We call this the speech banana. Clearly, we're designed to hear very soft sounds, so quiet sounds are up this end of the audiogram picture. 0 decibels is the quietest level we can hear at. And as the sounds get bigger, the number of decibels increases. What we want to know is the quietest level at which a child can hear across a range of frequencies going from low up to high. Now, what's key for children when they're growing and learning is that they've got access to a range of low frequency sounds in speech, but in particular that they've got access to a range of mid to high frequency sounds in speech. And these are the quietest sounds in speech. A normal level of hearing is around 20 decibels. So if children aren't hearing these higher pitched sounds in speech, they won't understand speech clearly, and they will have difficulty hearing in a variety of slightly challenging environments. So when we're looking at hearing, we want to know where they're at in relation to the speech banana. Are they above it, which should be normal? Are they in there and are they having problems? Or are they down here where they really will be having problems with their hearing? So this is a normal audiogram. We check each ear separately, and in this child here, red is the right ear, blue is the left ear, and the hearing levels are really quite normal. Now, in Alport syndrome, as Neil has said already, the hearing loss is never present at birth, but often becomes apparent early in childhood, sometimes under the age of 10, but often a little bit later or into early adolescence. And it's estimated that about 80% of boys with X-linked Alport will have hearing loss at some point in their lives, and usually by the time they're teenagers, which clearly is a very difficult time, even when you don't have Alport syndrome. And in girls with X-linked Alport, the hearing loss is less frequent and tends to occur later on in life. And boys and girls with autosomal recessive Alport typically have childhood hearing loss. And my understanding is that patients with autosomal dominant Alport may develop hearing loss later on, but it's not, as we've heard already, it's not a very common part or occurrence. So, I mean, in my clinic, I may see children who are starting off with their hearing loss somewhere up here, around 30 decibels, and often it will gradually deteriorate over time as their renal function deteriorates. But my understanding is that most people with Alport syndrome, even with end-stage renal failure, will have hearing that is very remediable. I think it's pretty exceptional for any patients with Alports to require cochlear implants. I know there was a lady here earlier, I'm not sure if she's still here, who has one, but that is not very common. So there are lots of interventions and advice available, and it's my experience in dealing with any child that you've got to have them on board. There's no point in adults making a great plan, we're going to do A, B, C and D. If the child doesn't want the help or intervention, you just have to work towards when they're ready. So there are lots of, the most important thing really to start with is to give the child strategies to deal with any hearing difficulties they've got and to be able to ask for help. Clearly, sorry, there's a few typos here. This was a bit late last night, apologies. Parents and teachers obviously need to be given advice about good hearing tactics both at home and at school. And as we heard earlier from Susie, the local teacher of the deaf can be a very valuable input to educate the school and to help the child with their hearing aid wear. Many children will benefit from FM systems in the classroom or sometimes at home. And of course it's really important that children protect the hearing, the residual hearing that they've got. So, you know, we get lots of parents asking about personal music players and should they have one, and we don't really want to give them one. Anyway, we can talk about that later. And of course it's important as well from the medical point of view to be aware of medications which may make hearing worse, and trying to monitor those very carefully or avoid them if at all possible. We've also heard about ibuprofen and those kind of drugs as well. So that it's important to look at conservation of hearing as well as management of it. And of course there are a variety of hearing devices. Some look a lot sexier now than what we had years ago, and they're getting smaller all the time. But really, and we can look at this kind of smaller device, but really children have to be committed to wearing these kind of devices first before we spend a lot of extra resource on smaller hearing aids. But we do use them for some of our adolescents if it helps the quality of their life and their compliance with hearing aid wear. And there is a lot of information available from the National Deaf Children's Society for children and for parents, which is very user-friendly for all aspects of their life. And there's a new website that's just come on board for teenagers who've got deafness, which teenagers in particularly might find helpful. So I'm going to finish there. Thank you very much.